Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of your Bish Therapist podcast. I am your host, Melissa Reich, your Bish Therapist, a real life therapist turned pop culture aficionado, serving clinical interpretations and hot takes on all things pop culture. Today's episode is going to be about reunion of Summer House, reunion part 1 of Summer House, and The Valley. And so many Bravo fans are up in arms, understandably so, myself included. I have so much to say about it all. I'm going to talk about, so today's episode, here's what you can expect, and I am going to issue a trigger warning at the top. Today's episode, we are going to have fun and have a kiki, but we're also going to talk about some really significant concepts such as emotional abuse, verbal abuse, specifically regarding the Valley. We are going to talk about consent and relationships, specifically West and Ciara. There were a lot of folks who felt like, there were consent issues and things like that. So I'm going to give my 2 cents on that. And we're just going to, again, my favorite Bravo phase is mention it all. I say it all the time. I'm sure it annoys people, but we're just going to mention it all because there's so much to talk about. Before we get into all that, I wanted to give everybody a little bit of a heads up about a couple things. Number 1, I solicited audience questions, listener questions, and so I'm going to be doing a separate episode to answer some of those questions. I don't know if it's going to air the same day as this, TBD. But thank you to those who submitted questions, and I do want this to be more interactive, and I'm trying to figure out ways to do that. Number 1. Number 2, I just wanted to give everybody a reminder that there are only 3 episodes left of your Bish Therapist podcast for season 2. I am taking a break. The last episode of season 2 is going to air at the last Tuesday in June. And then I'm going to take my vacation, and then I'm going to take some well-deserved rest and time off. And I have some health stuff to circle back to and all these things. But I will I'm going to do a thank you episode to just explain to people why I take my breaks, to give people a little bit of an update about my health, because I know when I talk about it, sometimes it can feel really scary. People get concerned. I'm okay, but I do have some things to take care of. So I'm going to do another separate episode as just like a thank you to everybody and kind of explaining what I have going on. So we can all look forward to that. But let's just get started today because I just have a feeling that this is going to be a long one. So I'm going to start with Summer House, the reunion part 1, because I think that for me, that is freshest in my brain, number 1. But number 2, I mean, West, is he just like hiding? Is he in hiding somewhere? If he's not, he probably should be, because every woman in the Bravoverse wants his head on a platter. And I can't say that I blame them. I, like every other person watching that, was just so grossed out and disgusted when it came to what West did, like his actual behaviors. And so today I'm going to talk a little bit about not only my clinical interpretations of that and what's going on, but I'm going to talk about, most people don't know that there's a name for it, but the fear of commitment is known as gamophobia. And it's caused by a variety of factors. And people who have gamophobia tend to exhibit similar behaviors. So I'm going to talk about all that because it certainly seems to me anyway that West is, just fearful and has some issues with commitment, and it seems like his family is extremely aware of that. And I'm just gonna talk about it because it's wild for me what's going on. By the way, so when I was getting my notes ready to do this podcast, one thing that really struck me is that West and Ciara are the same age. They're both 28, but Ciara seems like she's like way older because she's much more mature, and West seems like he's much younger because he's very immature. And I just wanted to point that out because I'm not sure if people realize that. They're both 28. They're both the same age. People are like, oh, West is young. And it's like, well, he's not that young. I mean, it's not like he's 20 years old. At 28, you should have some semblance and understanding of like how not to be a fuckboy. And So, and that's what people are calling him on the internet. Normally I'm very mindful of, how I am talking about things and things like that. But basically being an F boy essentially is kind of giving someone something that they want deceptively, and you're not really giving it to them. You're making it seem like you're giving them something that they want or need because you want sex in return. And then when you get that, you kind of move along your way. So to me, it's a really concerning behavior. And I absolutely agree that West has a lot to work on. So let's just get into it. We were all that Tyra Banks meme. We were all that meme of like, we were all rooting for you, West. We were all rooting for you. There were people who, listen, and this is why I don't stan anybody, because people, when we stan people, they're humans and they're imperfect, and so we're standing something that's probably not what we think it is. And for me, West is a really good example of this. Is people who stand him, it's like they're so disappointed. And this is why I look at, humanity is, all humans are imperfect, and people are on TV are humans and they're imperfect. And so yes, did West seem cute and sweet and, a good guy to Ciara and all of these things? He did seem that way. But for me, I'm going to be honest, I started to notice in the last couple of weeks before the reunion, and I didn't talk about it because I wanted to see, I needed to observe with my own eyes and ears what was going on. But I feel that the last couple weeks before the reunion, what we actually saw was West and Ciara would have talks. And Ciara is so clear. I mean, that woman is so clear about, she's been hurt before, what she's looking for in a relationship, what she's not looking for in a relationship. She is clear, honey. Okay. And West just kept going along with like, yeah, we're on the same page. Yeah. And it's like, but I don't think you are, because she's saying all of these boundaries and you're just staring at her, stammering over your words. And it doesn't also really seem like you are on the same page. It seemed like to me, as the reunion approached, that he made really weird and gross comments about, well, usually by this time we would have slept together. And it's like, bro, hold your MFing roll, okay? Because people owe, especially like women owe men in heterosexual relationships nothing physical, like until they're ready. Our bodies are ours, and they are not, there's no timetable of when it's like time to give yourself to somebody if you're not ready to. So that was one of the first issues that I really wanted to comment on, because it really made me angry. I don't give a shit how old you are, okay? If you are not ready to give your heart or your body or whatever to somebody, that's okay. You have to listen to that and honor that, because at the end of the day, we're our number one fans, right? As my foam finger says, we have to be our own number one fans. By the way, that's why I have this here. It's a reminder to be our own best advocates. And for people who are listening and not watching this on YouTube, I'm pointing to my bitch therapist foam finger that I always have now in my shots, because it really is a good reminder that I don't, there's this fallacy that like you get older and, that all of a sudden to be loved, you have to like have sex. And it's like, that's not true. So here's the thing with Ciara. She was super clear about her boundaries, about her history of being hurt, about being worried to get screwed over again, and not wanting to give everything of herself to just anybody. And my God, is that amazing to be able to say, here's what I need, and I am not giving of myself until I am good and ready. And I say, good for you. But we find out at the reunion that they did sleep together, because, and we were all wondering, I think Bravo fans were collectively wondering what would happen at the reunion, because it seemed like they weren't together on it anymore from social media. And so, here's what I perceive to have happened. Okay. From what I heard and what I understood, and I have my notes here, is that So we learned at the reunion that Ciara met West's parents, and he took her to like a wedding of like a really good friend. And I don't have all the exact details of it because there's so many moving parts here. I'm trying to keep track of things that are going on TV and then on social media and on podcasts. It's just like it's such a challenge. But so it seems like to me, Ciara was clear about what she wanted. West was like, okay, I'm going to give you this. They slept together. And then he was like, I really can't commit due to show related reasons. I swear to you, when he said that, I had to rewind it like multiple times because I was like, did he just say what I think he said? And it's like hearing him try to explain it only sunk him deeper. And I just feel like fame and notoriety completely got the best of West. He wanted to have his cake and eat it too. Because P.S., Ciara is an absolute queen. She is smart. She's a nurse. She is one of the most beautiful people I have ever seen on television. Like truly flawless, head to toe, top to tail. Gorgeous queen, smart, funny. Like West would be so lucky to be with her. And I feel like we all need a friend like Paige. Paige showed queen behavior for two reasons. Queen behavior of how to actually be a friend to someone, which Danielle could really take some notes on that because yikes. And number two, boundary queen. Because the thing that I like that Paige and Ciara both did, and they don't have to, they were assertive and outlined boundaries and were really clear about things, and they don't have to yell and they don't have to curse. Paige read West for filth, and every other woman, we were just like, yes, thank you, because every single woman watching that wanted to just like strangle West. I feel it was just so wild hearing him talk about show related reasons. And then it's like, well, what do you mean by that? So it seems to me that West just really wanted Ciara, and he wanted fame, and he wanted to be available for the female fan base. That, Paige was real honest. And I think she spit facts when what did she say to him? She said, oh, I have some of it written down here. But Paige essentially was like, listen, people are in your DMs. Just call it what it is. The Bravo fans are in your DMs. And I think at BravoCon, it certainly got the best of him. And he treated Ciara terribly as a result of prioritizing fame and being an F-boy, if I'm being honest. I mean, that's what his behaviors are telling me. Okay. He wanted it both ways, and you can't have it both ways. I think that, Ciara, to me, so this is something that a lot of folks aren't talking about, but to me, I know Ciara identifies as straight, heterosexual. However, sexual orientation, there's such a spectrum. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because there are constructs, for example, being demisexual or being pansexual, meaning that people are more attracted to the person, like the contents, rather than the packaging. Okay. But demisexual is essentially people need to have a emotional connection to be physically intimate with a partner, right? And I believe that that's what Ciara essentially is saying. It's not a preference. This is like very, very crucial and very important. And that's why I feel Bravo fans are so upset, because it's like, we were rooting for you, and what you took our queen and you stomped on her heart, and you made yourself look like such an F-boy in the process. And, the irony of it is like, yeah, Bravo is a ton of female fans, and none of them are going to be messing with you now. None of them. So now you don't have Ciara. You don't have the Bravo fans. And I don't know, if he comes back, it's going to be a rough season in terms of feedback and things like that. So I just think that the instant fame and notoriety it requires really strong character to maintain humility when it comes to fame and things like that. I will only speak for myself in this example, is that I was a regular person. I have this following on social media now. I have almost 13,000 followers. My podcasts are growing, and it's why. So for me, here's the thing. This is why I'm sharing this experience. For me, it could have been really easy to just fly away with all of, like, people are telling me that I'm amazing and they love me so much and all these things. But at the end of the day, I have strong roots and I have my feet on the ground, and I know that I'm just Melissa from the block. I mean, literally, like, people think I'm Oz and people think I'm this and I'm that, but I'm just me, and I'm human and I'm imperfect, and sometimes I'm wild and I'm silly and I do crazy things, and people would, I don't know what they would think about that. But I think that West got himself in a situation where he set himself up and Ciara up for failure, because, going back to, the demisexual conversation, is that Ciara is very guarded. And so I don't like when people describe her as cold, because it may look cold to the untrained eye, but she is guarding her heart because she's been very hurt. Now, there's two different concepts here, okay? There's the concept of consent, and people feel like West took away some of her consent, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And then there's also the issue of, like, Ciara's role in this, right? Like, Ciara's role in protecting her own heart and the decisions that she's making. And one thing that I put on social media that got a lot of varied feedback is that I get the picture with Ciara that she has had some trauma. I don't know specifically what, and I'm not going to guesstimate, but I get clinical inklings that she is guarded because she's been very hurt, and we don't know what that's looked like. But when someone is saying that I'm intentional with who I sleep with, and she said, I don't want to give myself to everyone, it's such a brave and important statement. But it also begs the question, what is her role in this, right? So let me talk about some of that. Okay, first I'm going to talk about consent. Consent, to be clear, it's an agreement between participants to engage in sexual activity. Consent should be clearly and freely communicated, and a verbal and affirmative expression of consent can help you both and your partner understand and respect each other's boundaries. That's kind of just like definition stuff. So what I view what happened was Ciara saying, this is what I want, this is what I need, this is what I want. West is saying, well, I don't understand why we haven't slept together yet. And she's saying, well, this is what I want. And every time she was having these conversations with West, he just didn't seem to be paying attention. He claimed they were on the same page. He didn't seem to be. West has this kind of like little kid expression, in my opinion, when he feels like he's in trouble. And he just kind of seems to crawl into himself, and he kind of just makes faces, but he doesn't really say a lot. And so I'm wondering what that's about for him. But he didn't seem to have a lot of empathy towards Ciara when she was crying and Kyle was crying with her, which, by the way, restored my faith in Kyle. And I wanted to know, what was that about? Like, Kyle being tearful when Ciara was crying. And this is where I wish, my God, my dream one day would be to like go to host something or to reunions, because I think there's things that sometimes get missed. Like that moment, what was that crying about? What was that about for Kyle? I'm just telling you is that when you have people who guard themselves with thick layers of armor and they seem cold, right? Like Erica Jane, people said she was cold, she was cold, she was cold. But sometimes women who have been hurt and have a history of trauma can guard themselves because they are so afraid of being hurt. And I have a lot of empathy for that. It seemed like when she was crying and when she was talking about this, West didn't have a lot of empathy, but I don't know how he felt. I'm just watching it like everybody else. A tear didn't come to his eye. You know, maybe he doesn't express emotions like that, but I would have liked to see more I'm sorry from him. You know, he just kind of sat there like this little kid who was getting in trouble at school, and he was like, oh God. And then when Jesse piped up, it's like, dude, don't even do it. Like, Jesse, no, don't do it. Because I understand he's trying to be a friend of West. I get that. But when it comes to this level of gray area, when it comes to, you know, consent and sexual relationships, Jesse has no business commenting on that, if I'm being honest. I think that he was trying to be a good friend, but I appreciated how Paige and Ciara shut it down, because Wes doesn't need people to make excuses for him. He's made enough excuses for himself, if I'm being honest. So here, let me talk a little bit about gamophobia, which is the fear of commitment, and specifically marriage, but really fear of commitment. So there's a couple of reasons why this happens for people. Number one is past trauma. So painful breakup, watching your parents, like, you know, the situation with our family of origin issues, right? If we are witness to really difficult dynamics, relationship dynamics growing up that seem really scary and, you know, to children, then sometimes that can make people very afraid as they grow. However, I don't think that's the case in this situation, and I'm going to tell you why. Because there was a little nugget that I didn't hear people talk about or bring up. West made a comment about how his parents said that he was an idiot and that he totally screwed up, and they had concerns about this from the get-go. So what does that tell me? That tells me that he was raised by people who seem like, I don't know anything about them, but just on this, they seem like they have a good understanding of their son. They have a good understanding of their son's character defects and patterns with women. So to me, what his parents said about him being an idiot and we love Ciara and you royally screwed up and you have a pattern of doing that, he has a pattern of doing this, is what I'm saying. He has a pattern of bringing women home that his parents adore, and then all of a sudden being like, you know what, this is getting too real. I got to cut and run. That's what that tells me. And so this whole past trauma thing, what you model in your parents' relationship, this does not seem like the answer to West's gamophobia. Second thing is lack of trust. So fear of rejection or failure in relationships can lead someone to believe that they would be devastated if a commitment didn't work out. So some people get so afraid of being rejected or failing in a relationship that they just avoid it altogether, avoid the seriousness of a relationship, because you can't break up if you're not serious to begin with. That felt a little bit more that felt like that made a little bit more sense to me, if I'm being honest, when it comes to West. Just like fear of not being liked or fear of being rejected. You know, I think he seems like the type of person that definitely struggles to have an opinion. He struggles to like pick a lane. He's too wishy-washy. And we saw that the past couple of weeks leading up to the reunion part one. I feel like West says a lot without saying anything. He does this kind of like mushy word salad where he's like, oh, well, I don't know. And it's like he's not saying anything, but there's words coming out. And that is usually, for me, an indication of someone who is either insecure, unsure of themselves, fearful of what people are going to say. There can be a lot of reasons for that, but that's definitely something that I clocked for sure. The third reason why someone may have gamophobia is desire for independence and feeling like a relationship or a marriage is you're trapped and you're going to miss out on other experiences. But what people don't realize is if you marry your best friend, like my husband and I, we're truly like, we're bros. Like we bro out, we hang out, you know, we're best friends. I mean, I have other girlfriends too, because he can't be my only friend, you know, like hello, I have my girlfriends and I have my support system and all of that. But my point is that marriage isn't the end. It should be the beginning. It should be the beginning of a beautiful friendship and relationship and a life together and all these things. But sometimes people are so afraid of like, well, this means I'm trapped and I'll never be able to sleep with anybody again. And it's like, is that really a problem for you? I mean, like, if you're not ready to settle down, then don't. But I do just feel that West has FOMO, which for people who don't know what that is, it's fear of missing out. I think that he gets FOMO, and I think he just like doesn't understand that you can have all the things that you want in a good relationship and you don't have to commit until you have those things. Ciara absolutely could have given him that. He was just too afraid to accept it. And then another one is mental health conditions. So fear of commitment can be a symptom of social anxiety disorder, avoidant personality disorder, some other personality disorders, but also post-traumatic stress disorder. So I am not here to diagnose anybody with anything. I'm just stating the facts, and I have no idea what West's situation is. But some of these to me do ring some bells. Now, people with a commitment phobia may exhibit things like self-sabotage. So they might end a relationship prematurely or sabotage it in a way that'll make it end. So that's kind of what I feel like Wes did. He sabotaged it. And I don't know if it was some weird combination of sabotage and ghosting. And I have no idea exactly how it ended, but that seems interesting to me. People also may have difficulty making plans. They might be hesitant to plan anything too far into the future. Like we all know people like that who are like, oh, well, I don't know what I'm going to be doing in a month, or who knows, or like whatever, but they can't even commit to like making a date or anything like that. And that definitely seems like something that West for sure struggles with. And then another one is self-centered behavior. People who just have some narcissistic traits and tendencies may be reluctant to put their partner's needs first, or they may be like just afraid to be a we. They want to be an I. They don't want to be a we. But it comes from a place of ego and fear. And, you know, it's really not about the partner. It's about their own stuff. But anyone who's been in the situation or hurt by someone who's struggling with this, I mean, it's so painful and so hard. So I think that's why we just all got so frustrated, because like Ciara couldn't have been more clear, right? And so it certainly seems that he did some of this stuff. Some of it may have been accidental or unconscious, but he knew enough to know what he was doing here. And that is why Bravo fans are pissed off, because when we like someone, we do not want to feel like we've been played. And I think a lot of Bravo fans felt played, especially Bravo accounts that really stand West. And again, that's why I talk about we don't need to stand anybody. These people that we're seeing on TV are human beings, and they are flawed and they are imperfect. And there are people that I admire for sure, but working as a therapist teaches you not to stand anybody, because sometimes if you saw what was behind and some of those darker corners, like it just don't stand people is what I'm saying, because you're always going to get let down. I just feel bad for people. I'm not completely shocked by this because I kind of saw the writing on the wall. How many conversations can Ciara have cuddling in bed with him that he's just literally not saying anything? She's doing all the talking. He's got nothing to say. It's just a very, very wild situation. So I've talked about them for so long. Oh, the one thing I want to say before I move on is when Ciara walked out and Wes's face, when he looked at her, I said it was the metaphorical slap in the face that he desperately needed. Like, he would have been lucky, as Paige said, to be with this woman, to have her heart, to have her respect and love. You wish, buddy. And now, good luck with that. Oh my gosh. Okay, what else? Okay, so the last thing I'm going to say about Ciara before I move on, because I wanted to go back to her role in this. It seems to me that Ciara is attracted to emotionally unavailable men. How do I know that? to me, anyone who dates Austin Kroll, it's like a clinical psychological indicator. I'm not joking. If you date Austin, you are at least somewhat attracted to people who are emotionally unavailable and emotionally immature and cannot meet your needs. I mean, that's it. Austin and Shep, like, I can't wait till I just can't wait till Southern Charm comes back. And, I can't wait to hear about Craig and Spritzgate and all that other stuff. But as I mentioned before, I think Ciara is very guarded. And I think she has a trauma history in which she feels like she really needs to protect herself with thick, huge layers of armor. And getting hurt after being so intentional, it can cause wounds that feel fatal, that truly feel like I can never recover from this. I can never bounce back from it. But what I want to tell you is that that's a feeling and not a fact. Okay. So anyone that's been really hurt, you can be okay. You can move forward. It's not going to be the end of you, but it feels like it will. And I just want to say that I think there's a myriad of factors that lead to being attracted to emotionally unavailable partners, including, familiarity due to family dynamics, low self-esteem, tendency to self-neglect, and more. And people ask me a lot when I'm talking about self-neglect, what do I mean? Self-neglect is when we grew up in maybe a family system or a group system, because everyone grows up differently. Not everyone has a traditional nuclear family unit. Not everybody has that. In fact, lots of people don't. So for me, whatever dynamic you grew up in, it can impact your ability to feel safe with other people or to feel safe to let other people get access to your emotions. So for example, if people were raised in a situation where they were constantly criticized or vulnerable things were weaponized by parents or caretakers or what have you, they're going to learn real quick, let me not do that. But the problem is sometimes, whether it's that or low self-esteem or whatever it is, we have to look at that for ourselves, because we can love somebody else before we love us, but we get into trouble when we have these unconscious processes playing out. And it happens a lot of times with relationships. We have these unconscious processes that we're not aware of get played out. We hear those people who talk about, why do I keep attracting people who are, or being in relationships with people who are abusive or emotionally unavailable. We create patterns. We recreate patterns, and it's not purposeful. Nobody likes that we do it. I dated nothing but narcissists until I started doing work on myself, and I would be so frustrated. And I'd be like, why is this happening? And it's like, well, me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. Taylor Swift is so wise. And it's not to make people feel bad, but Ciara has to participate in her own self-advocacy, self-love, so that she can truly find a partner who fits her and supports her the way that she deserves and needs to be loved and supported and all of these things. I hope that makes sense to you all. But let me, one last thing I'm going to say about Paige is just that I feel, I've said this before in podcasts, she definitely could have been a therapist in another life, for sure. Because here's what she said. So Paige called West out. Cameras went down and DMs started flooding in. And then, West said he didn't, oh God, he said, I didn't want to be Ciara's puppet, to which Paige snapped, that would be a lucky spot for you. And how was fame more enticing than her? No notes. I have no notes, because that is 1,000%. Do you see this woman? Do you see how amazing she is? How beautiful she is? How smart? How funny? How she's just like a good person? And you're going to be like, I didn't want to be your puppet. You would have been lucky to be her puppet, you dummy. Ugh. So the one thing I wanted to say about Danielle is that, okay, so a couple things with this leaked article about Craig and Paige at a wedding. And so essentially what happened was Craig and Paige were at someone's wedding. I forget who it was, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking. He got really drunk and he tried to use a bathroom inside of the house, but there were only porta potties, and so he was like being drunk and belligerent, and he was asked to leave. Okay. And so this article was leaked. And I think the fact is that we need to focus on the behavior that Craig displayed more than we do on Danielle and Lindsay lying about it. However, I just feel that Danielle, she let people, like, she let Paige blame Lindsay, and she just had nothing to say about that. And to me, that says a lot about her character. I'm not the biggest fan of Danielle. I don't think, it's rare that I'll actually say that, because to me, I'm like, well, everyone's human and blah, blah, blah. But for me personally, there's some things about her that just are red flags. And this is one of them. They showed a flashback to her sitting at the reunion watching Paige blame Lindsay. And Lindsay was like, no, it wasn't me. And it wasn't Lindsay. And Danielle was just sitting there. And it's like, how can you sleep at night? I don't know. I think that says a lot about her character. At first, I thought it was like uncool that Lindsay did immediately throw Danielle under the bus. But at the same time, like, I do understand wanting to clear her name because she didn't do it. I guess I just think that, like, Lindsay's motives for doing that, they were very self-focused. It wasn't necessarily about helping Paige or finally being open. It was just like, I don't want to be blamed anymore. So, I don't know how I feel about that, but I do think it was appropriate for Paige to like clock those moves. And then there was something else that she said Lindsay did, like talking crap at her about like at a photo shoot. And then Lindsay said that wasn't true and that it was another one of Carl's lies. And here's the thing. Okay, I'm going to talk about Carl and Lindsay now. Here's the thing about Carl and Lindsay, okay, that I want to point out. Someone on my Instagram pointed out, and they used this term that I loved. It was that neither Carl nor Lindsay are reliable narrators. And here's what this means, and here's proof of this. There's that saying, the truth is, I have my perspective, the other person has their perspective, and somewhere in the middle is the truth. And so essentially what that means is our perception is our reality. And our truth may be true to us, but may not be the actual truth of real life of what happened. Okay. And so Carl says a lot of things and Lindsay says a lot of things, but the fact of the matter is they're both part of the issue for sure. And my frustration is that Carl does seem to at least verbalize that they are both responsible. Now, how much of that he actually believes, I'm skeptical about that. I think he says the right things. I don't think he always believes it. But the concerning thing for me about Lindsay is just that she lacks ability to just be like, yes, you know what? I played a role in this. Yes, I participated in this. Like, she really does have trouble taking ownership. I mean, she does. And I think that just will lead nowhere good. Because any relationship that she's going to be in, and by the way, rumors are, and I don't talk a lot about rumors, and especially when it comes to reproductive stuff, but a lot of Bravo accounts are posting that she's in a relationship with an ex and she is pregnant. And for me, I don't know. That's the word on the social media streets, but I have no idea how true that is or not. But my point is that this isn't all Carl and it's not all Lindsay. They both picked each other. They chose each other. They stayed together despite severely toxic circumstances. Lindsay would have went forward with the wedding if Carl had not called it off, which is the most wildly concerning thing to me, that like this is okay for you. Like, you're not even able to sleep in the same apartment as your soon to be husband. And like, you just want to go ahead with it. Like, she has stuff to look at is what I'm saying. And I think that proof of the fact that they're unreliable narrators. So when they talked about Flower Boy Gate, okay, they talked about that and they said it was Lindsay's idea, but Carl's decision. Okay, so at first Carl was like, well, Lindsay told me or made me feel like I couldn't have Kyle as a groomsman. And Lindsay was like, no, that had nothing to do with me. And what's crazy to me is that, so the truth lied somewhere in the middle, which was the flower boy thing was Lindsay's actual idea, but it was her idea, not specifically for Kyle. It was her idea about, well, if you have these extra groomsmen, and they were getting married at like an adult only resort. And so there were no kids. And so all of this came together in her head to say, well, I have 9 bridesmaids. I guess Carl had 11 groomsmen, which, yikesers. For anyone who's been married, like that's a lot. That's a lot of people to have in your wedding. And so the idea came because of Carl saying, well, I can only have 9. So what do I do with the other 2? And, it grew from there. So Lindsay said, I don't know where he got that, but it was her idea. And then Carl said, like, he felt pressured, even though she didn't say Kyle couldn't be a groomsman. So this is what I'm trying to say about them not being reliable narrators. The reality lies somewhere in the middle of their perceptions. And again, I understand people relate to Lindsay because people who know what it is to be hurt, to be mistreated, whatever it is. But I think that we have to be careful about over-identifying with people in a situation that is not the same as ours. It may be apples and oranges, and they're just both unreliable narrators. So I thought that was like a really good example of how neither of their words can really be totally trusted. And only through processing it is where you get the real information. So I'm going to be talking about this a whole lot more on for the reunion part 2. But what I have to talk about now is Carl recently had a rift with Captain Lee, and I got all the dirt and all the details. I listened to Captain Lee. He has a podcast called Salty with Captain Lee, which is such a cute name, salty like the sea, but also like Captain Lee's a little bit of a gruff guy, but he just seems like a wonderful person. And to me, it's like, Lindsay may be an unreliable narrator, and so is Carl, but like Captain Lee seems like a good judge of character. And so for me, this is the first bit of information that we're getting that I'm really taking seriously. And I have real concerns about Carl when it comes to what Captain Lee said. So I'm going to explain the situation. I'm going to tell you what was said, and then we're going to go from there. And I actually wrote down, like I listened to the podcast and I wrote it down. So here's what Captain Lee said. Captain Lee said, Carl and I used to be close. I gave Carl an opportunity to be on the podcast and tell it like he saw it about the breakup between he and Lindsay. There was a question he wanted taken off. I'm sorry. Captain Lee said, if there was a question he wanted taken off, we took it off. It was a softball interview because I wouldn't have done something to intentionally put Carl on the spot. So apparently what happened was they recorded this interview and it was post breakup. It was at BravoCon. So BravoCon last year. All right. They had broken up. Carl, I guess, got the opportunity to go on Captain Lee's podcast. Captain Lee said he wanted to give Carl an opportunity to just like tell his side of the story, tell his truth. Like it just sounded like Captain Lee was really giving him an opportunity. And so they recorded the interview. Carl okayed everything. Everything was fine. And then at BravoCon, they launch a tease before the episode airs. So I do that as well. Like before my episodes, I'll do like a little clip and I'll release it on Instagram and social media and things like that. And so they launched their tease, and immediately he got a phone call. Captain Lee got a phone call from Carl. And literally this is what Captain Lee said. He said, Carl went off saying that I was taking advantage of him and trying to put him on the spot. Captain Lee's publicist was there and Carl's publicist was there. And he said, so his publicist was, I guess she's also like his co-host for the podcast. Her voice, like if you listen to Salty with Captain Lee, the female voice is this person who he's talking about, who was there to witness this. And she's like a producer for him and things like that. Captain Lee says, I don't know what made him go off the way he went off or why he thought what he was thinking. I told him, you don't want it aired. No problem. We won't air it. And then Captain Lee said, I don't know what he cared about. He just demanded that we didn't air it. And let me be clear. It was a demand. It wasn't asking. It wasn't, hey, I'm rethinking this. I'm really concerned. It was aggressive. It was angry. The producer pipes in and says, oh, no, I'm sorry. Captain Lee says, I gave him the opportunity to tell his story from his viewpoint, and he can say what he wanted to say. He didn't have to say anything he felt uncomfortable with. And the producer said, the behavior tracks. And then this is what she said. And it was like, oof. She said, we were blindsided by his reaction too. I was like, clearly they're Team Lindsay. But they claim that they were blindsided by his reaction, and he was well aware of the conversation. It was a complimentary interview, and it didn't put him in a bad light. They both said that. And the producer said it was like Jekyll and Hyde. And the thing that really pushed me over the edge is when Captain Lee said that Carl literally went off on him, screamed at him, and then hung up on him. I was like, no, sir. We are not going to hang up on Captain Lee. Not going to do it. Hanging up on someone is the most immature, grossest, dumbest thing that you can do. And listen, if people are listening to this and they're like, shoot, I do that. Okay, we can only do better once we know better, but we have to stop hanging up on people. It's just so gross and weird. So this is what Captain Lee said too. This was wild. Captain Lee said, I don't think after watching this season of Summer House, I don't think certain people were entirely honest with me. Captain Lee said, everyone deserves to have their opinion heard and not be slapped around for it. It doesn't sit well with me. And Captain Lee, the final thing he did was confirm the end of his relationship with Carl. He said, I thought we had a solid relationship considering our background together, which what that means is Captain Lee is also sober and in the program, I believe, of AA. So here's what people need to understand is when you are sober and you have it's called fellowship, which I'm not going to talk about it too much because the 12 traditions are not for like podcast, radio, TV. Like you're really not supposed to talk too much about it. But what I'm saying is that having a sober connection with someone is very seriously bonding in the sober community. It's taken very seriously. And so for me, that adds a little bit of an extra layer, knowing that about the program, knowing that this was his relationship with Carl and that, at the end of the day, Captain Lee said, no good deed goes unpunished. And I think that that's really wild. I think that it does say a lot about Carl. It says a lot about his ability to be honest, and he is not a reliable narrator of things that happen, right? I mean, for what that's worth, I'm kind of speechless about that. And I love Captain Lee. I don't watch Below Decks because I truly get so seasick that like even watching it on TV, it actually makes me sick. I'm not joking. However, Captain Lee seems like a wonderful person, and I don't like how Carl treated him. I have very serious issues with that. Okay, so guess what? We don't have a lot of time left, but we're going to talk about the Valley. I talked way too much about the Summer House reunion. But let's get into the Valley. So the season finale of the Valley was last week. And number one, I am beyond pissed that we are not getting a reunion. Why? Why are we not getting a reunion? What is happening? Second of all, the thing that I really want to talk about is there's been a lot of stuff off, like on social media, off of the show that's been going on. So for people who may not be in the know, Jax and Brittany were separated. The finale showed her moving out because she and her child had to move out to another home while Jax lived at their home. Okay, so this is the first thing I'm going to address. Okay. I don't necessarily care about the gender construct situation where, Brittany was like, well, I'm from Kentucky and what kind of man does that? And it's like, okay, if she was single, if they didn't have a child, to me, it's not like, it's archaic to believe that like women need to treat or men need to treat women a certain way. When it comes to this stuff, like, I don't know how I feel about all of that. However, they have a child who is struggling and having more developmental needs than anticipated, whatever that looks like for them. And Jax has them move out of the house. He has his child move out of the house. That is egregious. That's egregious, and it's about power and control. Case in point, this week we saw on social media that Jax, after the finale, and people were like Team Britney and, you know, talking about Jax and how terrible he was, he posted this tweet about ask her who she's been sleeping with for the past 4 months. And then he, of course, deletes it because Jax's favorite thing to do is tweet and delete, which just shows that he's got a lot of stuff going on. And let me be clear, I can't be super specific about any of it because an average podcast host could diagnose someone all day long. They could have fun and make fun of it and laugh. I actually can diagnose people, and you know Jax would be more than happy to sue me. So I'm not going to come and say he has this personality disorder, he has that, he has this. First of all, that would not be responsible of me because I don't know him. He's not my client. And let me be clear, even if he were, he could not, he would run away from me screaming because I've dealt with men like him in my private practice throughout the last couple of decades. And men like that, they don't want anything to do with me. They're allergic to people like me. They're allergic to a woman who is going to call them on their stuff, to consistently take them to task for it. And he doesn't want that. Jax doesn't want that. So Jax then posts a picture of Britney sleeping in bed and Cruz sleeping like next to her. And then to me, it became clear. So here's what Jax is trying to do. I said this on one of my last podcasts about him. He's trying to rewrite the narrative in his favor. And some fans are letting him do it. Just like people allow Tom Sandoval to triangulate. I mean, even what's going on right now with Billy Lee and Kyle and all these things, which I'm not going to get into that because I don't really do gossipy stuff, but it's just the point that people with these personality types, they use these tips and tricks on everybody all the time. And it's about maintaining power and control. And that's what I believe is the situation with Jax. So Jax is essentially saying, well, you all think she's so abused and you think she's this and she's that, but she's been sleeping with me. And then cut to Britney confirming on a podcast that does happen sometimes, that I don't know if it's physical intimacy or just sleeping in the same bed. But Britney said that, you know, they're still co-parenting. And since he kicked her and his child out of their own home, which, let me be clear too, if a child is having more developmental issues than anticipated, a consistent schedule, consistent home life, consistent relationships are going to be helpful for him. So what Jax is doing right now is actually, in my opinion, harmful, based on the situation that we're seeing what's going on with him, with his son. I believe that Jax cares more about himself than he does about literally anybody else. And you can say a lot of stuff. People say a lot of things. Jax says a lot of stuff. It's the behaviors that are going to tell us the truth. And what Jax's behaviors tell us consistently is that he has a very tenuous relationship with the truth. He believes that his needs are most important. He is perfectly comfortable having his wife and his young son be displaced. And I believe it is all in the name of power and control. So Jax said, and this is kind of to prove that point. So Jax said, there's no abuse. Jax said, I don't understand what's going on. There's no abuse. Nobody cheated, blah, blah, blah. I don't understand this. And it was just the biggest bunch of bullshit, this biggest bunch of woe is me bullshit. And then cut to flashbacks of Jax engaging in verbally and emotionally abusive behavior, saying things like, and yes, he did say these things. You have no friends here. What was the purpose of him saying you have no friends here? I'll tell you what the purpose was: to try to get Brittany to feel lonely and isolated and desperate and to stay with him. It's step one in the playbook. Step one. And that's what that comment is. Okay. He also said you're lazy and you're fat. And when I heard that, I felt so much rage. I truly need to be mindful about what I say right now, because what I want to say about Jax, I want to clinically read him for filth. But I know he's a coward and he will sue me. So here's what I'm going to say. This isn't love. It is abuse. Jax can say whatever the fuck he wants to say, but his behaviors are telling the truth of the story, and those behaviors are abusive. It is very rare that you are going to hear me come on this mic and say that a behavior is flat out abusive, but it is. I mean, what else can I say? The put downs, act like a mother and you're lazy and you're fat and all these things. Here's the thing. None of it's about Brittany. It's about Jax's unrelenting desire to maintain power and control over people in his life. That's what it is. There's also something called displacement, which is a defense mechanism that involves taking like negative. Well, I don't believe in negative feelings. Side note, I think all feelings serve a purpose. The painful feelings maybe are harder, but they teach us things. So I don't necessarily believe in negative feelings. But anyway, so it involves transferring painful feelings from one thing into another, basically having a bad day and coming home and taking it out on a spouse, having a bad day and coming home and kicking the dog, which if that was an old example used in like my my clinical psychology classes, like obviously no, that's not even a good example, because anyone who puts their hands on animals is just like, no, we can't even play about that. But my point is that Jax has all these ego defenses to protect his very fragile ego. And one of them is to, like, he's a miserable person and he wants to make excuses for himself. And as a result, he's slinging his pain. I talk about this all the time. He slings his pain onto the person who he's supposed to love the most. It's not about her weight. It's not about how she looks. It's not about her being good enough. It's another method of control and manipulation. And the online rhetoric that Brittany brought this on herself is a common response towards women who have been abused. They should have known better. They should have seen it coming. They should have left sooner, blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what? That's a bag of bullshit, and I'm going to tell you why. Psychologically speaking, there are so many nuanced factors behind staying in an unhealthy relationship that doesn't serve us anymore, whether that's unhealthy, abusive, whatever it is. It's a human condition to want and to need love. All humans want it. All humans need it. And the connection and the love that we want from our partner, we don't stop wanting that ever. And so sometimes based on a myriad of factors, it's hard to spot red flags and exit in a timely and effective manner. And do you know why? Because people do things like what Jax is doing. Well, you don't have any friends, so who are you going to go to? Or you're fat, or you're lazy, so who's going to love you? Nobody's going to love you. Men with these certain personality types, these fragile egos, these very outlandish defense mechanisms, they all have one thing in common, which is just they don't want to change. And they want to just maintain power and control over people. That's all it is. Jax, Brittany did really read him for filth, which I freaking loved, seeing her finally stand up for herself in the way that she deserves. And I guess before I move on from this, I just want to say to people listening, because I know I have a lot of survivors and thrivers and, people listening to this right now. I just want people to know it's not your fault. Somebody abusing you or mistreating you has nothing to do with you and everything to do with them. And men, when they use these tactics, I mean, women use them too. It's not just men, but in this example, they do things to make someone feel unlovable. and isolated, and like they can never move forward, or using their child as bait to say, well, he really deserves a two-parent, the point is that there's a lot of reasons why people stay, and a lot of it is because they're gaslit. They're made to believe things that are not true. So if you're listening to this and this is resonating with you, please know you deserve happiness. I don't care what it is that you think you've done. You deserve love, connection, and happiness, period. And Jax is an example of someone who, Jax made a comment about the day before they filmed. He made a counseling appointment, which Brittany called him on, and she said, oh, you did that because we were filming, and so you wanted to be able to say when we were filming that you made it, which is exactly right. And guess what? Jax didn't attend the appointment because he said it was quote unquote too far. Another thing men with these personality profiles will do is they will just pick any lie out of the sky. It doesn't even have to be a good one. And this isn't even a particularly good lie. It's just enough to just exhaust Brittany. So what Jax is doing, and what men like this do, they just want to exhaust their foe. Because he views her as a foe. He doesn't view her as a partner. He doesn't view her as the mother of my child. He views her as a foe to be vanquished. And he talked about looking for an antidepressant. And I was just like, Jesus Christ. Let me say this really clear. Antidepressants can be life-saving. I'm on Lexapro. It's been amazing. I think medication when you're dealing with a lot of issues is super helpful. Y'all know how I feel about that. But this is not that. Jax is looking for another passive way, another bullshit excuse to just evade the work. The appointment being too far away, guess what? Since the pandemic hit, every therapist that I know offers telehealth. He easily could have done that. He easily could have said, you know what? I made the appointment for in person. My schedule changed. I can't do that. Can I switch to a telehealth? Typically, it is no problem. Brittany's right. It's a front, and he doesn't want to change. And to me, Jesse and Jax are examples of people who have nobody but themselves to blame for losing their spouses. They both banked on their partners tolerating toxicity in the name of preserving family values. Like Jesse and Jax really threw out some misogynistic bullshit out there about like, well, I just thought, Michelle and Brittany would want to preserve family values. And it's like, in the 50s, that's what kept women around. This same rhetoric that when you marry someone, it's for life, and it doesn't matter how they abuse you or how they mistreat you or how they make you feel. You're just destined to just stay there. And that's not the case. It used to be. It is not the case anymore. And I feel like kudos to Michelle and Brittany, for choosing happiness and choosing to get away from the chaos. But what upsets me about the Brittany and Jax situation is the fact that Brittany admitted, she's like, there's some days where I go over there and we do pool parties and we co-parent and it's great. And then there's some times where we fight so bad, we got to go. And it's like, I understand what Brittany's trying to do, and I'm not here to judge her for it, but I am just here to say, putting Cruz continually in that situation, whether you're together or not, the whole point of that is that it's really unhealthy for him. And the last thing I'm going to say about this is that sometimes kids, when they're in a peak developmental age and there's delayed speech, sometimes there are situations where it is out of fear if there is abuse going on in the household. Think about this for a second. If you're learning how to talk, okay, and you're seeing what happens when your mom talks or your dad talks, and it's fighting and it's arguing and it's explosive and it's angry, kids develop something called selective mutism, which is kind of a term to describe that sometimes fear in a household can create developmental delays simply due to that dynamic. Now, I am not saying that is what the situation is. I don't know Brittany. I don't know Cruz. I don't know Jax. I'm not their therapist. I'm just putting out there what my clinical intuition is telling me, is that even if the verbal and emotional abuse that's continued, that Cruz has continued to witness, it's certainly not going to help his development. It's just not. So whether it's, a diagnosable issue. I don't know. I'm not going to speak about that. No matter what it is, my point is that being in this sort of environment is not going to be helpful for Cruz or for any child. And so I understand what Brittany's trying to do. People get put in tough positions when you are having to co-parent with someone like an abuser, someone with a personality profile that they're going to make it their life's work to bring you down. It's exhausting. So I'm not judging Brittany. I'm not judging anybody else. I'm just saying that I hope she's able to continue to put herself and her son first, because she deserves better. He deserves better. And Jax is never going to change. The only time Jax will change is if he wants to and if he's ready to. And I have not seen any indication of that whatsoever. So this was a long episode, and thank you for hanging in there with me. I know there was some other stuff from the Valley that I didn't get to talk about. I will talk about that more. I am going to do another episode answering some listener questions, so look out for that. And maybe when I do that, we'll talk about the Valley as well. But for now, this is an extra long episode, and I don't know. I think people get tired of hearing me speak, and I get tired of hearing myself. So I hope you enjoyed the episode for today. Please keep in mind 3 more episodes left of your Bish Therapist podcast. I'm very excited to bring you a couple of new things. I have a couple of things in the irons in the fire, a couple of interesting people that I'm trying to get on the podcast. So my message is just that stay tuned. I'm here to grow. I'm here to learn. I'm here to mention it all. And even though I'm taking a break and I'm kind of excited about that, when I'm taking my break, I'm going to be doing episodes for the Spreaker Supporters Club. I'm going to be figuring out, does Spreaker Supporters Club really work for everybody? Should I just go over to Patreon? I don't know. I don't know yet. But for now, I'm doing the Spreaker Supporters Club. So if you want to hear episodes while I am on my break, go over to Spreaker.com, search Your Bish Therapist. You can follow me there and subscribe. And when the new episodes come about, that's how you listen to them on Spreaker as well. But I will be more clear about that. So for today, thank you so much for listening. I can't wait to bring you a whole bunch of really great episodes before the end of season 2. And I'm just really grateful for you all. Please, as always, don't forget to go ahead and give me a 5-star review if you're enjoying the podcast. I will be continuing to post on my YouTube as well. If you like to see my facial gymnastics, you can always go over there and look at that. And of course, in my background, you can see my Your Bish Therapist foam finger. We're number 1, guys. Okay, we're number 1. We have to be our own best advocates. So please take care of yourselves and each other. And ta-ta for now. Disclaimer, posts are not intended to diagnose, treat, or provide medical advice. Your Bish Therapist is for entertainment and informational purposes only. The podcast, my opinions, and posts are my own and are not associated with past or present employers, any organizations, Bravo TV, Greyheart Productions, or any other television network. The information on YBT Podcast and on its social media is provided for general informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat. Please do not act or refrain from acting based on anything you read, see, or hear on YBT Podcast or associated social media. Communicating with YBT via email and or social media does not form a therapeutic alliance. Melissa, operator of YBT, is unable to provide any therapeutic advice, treatment, or feedback.